today's webinar, our focus would be more on a practical implementation or strategies on accessible platforms. So for today's webinar, my team and I, whom I'll be introducing very shortly, will be looking at of accessible learning platforms, and also try to give you some strategies around ways of ensuring that your materials, your documents are accessible for all students. And to do this, I would be joined by my team, Ike and Philip. I'm not sure if they can switch on their cameras so that people could see them, or you rather wait for your turn when you do the presentation. Ike and Philip, I'm not sure who's navigating the slides. If you can just put them in or put them on.
Jao, thank you. My camera is already on.
Is the slides on?
Yes, it's on, but we're not sharing yet.
Oh, you may share the slides. Thank you.
All right. I can share from my stand. Just give me a minute. Oh, my sharing is turned off. Philip, maybe share from yours. I can't share.
Would you do that? Are you able to share the slides?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. As we all can hear, we are such a UDL team. If the other one can do something, the other one will just quickly punch in multiple ways of doing things, and collaboration, which is something SAID often promote, if not all the time. So the important question that everyone will be asking themselves is why we should be on slide 2, right, Philip? Why accessibility?
Benedict, sorry, maybe Philip and I can just introduce ourselves so that you just know.
Oh yes, sorry.
Oh, we are, no problem. So welcome everyone. Just like I'm part of Benedict's team in looking at teaching and learning materials to make them accessible. My name is Ikechukwu Wanze. I'm from the Division of Disability Studies. Yeah, my area of passion and, where I work on is on digital and accessibility. And I work with Benedict and Philip and the SILT team in navigating, how practices in order to make teaching and learning materials accessible. Thank you. And maybe Philip.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm both visible and audible. I'm Philip Dambisia. I'm a trainee learning designer at SILT and was fortunate enough to be able to work with Benedict and Ike on this. I hope you all benefit from this, and yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Philip. Am I still audible, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Then you can move, I believe, to Philip. Who's navigating the slide? Is it Ike or Philip? Okay, perfect. Slide 2. Yep. So we all should be asking ourselves why accessibility matters for not only me, student with disabilities, but why is it important for everyone? And my team and I thought of a couple of ways in which why we believe accessibility, why it is important. And the first sort of reason that we believe it's important is that we now have moved to the digital space where almost everything that we do, everything that one is required to do, has an element of digital access. And then also issues like libraries, online libraries, where students like myself and even those with various disabilities need access to. So we thought for us, we believe, or we sort of thought of why is it important for persons like students with disabilities and students like myself, or even colleagues, because it's not only student, but it's also employees who might be working as like myself as a trained learning designers. Why do we think that accessibility is important? So Philip, the next slide. Thank you. So the first sort of reason is we looked at diversity, and we thought if with UCT promoting diversity within the 2030 vision, it's quite critical that we should relook at ways in which how we can accommodate this diversity. And unfortunately, in South Africa, we don't have an online accessibility policies or the legislation, although we do have some frameworks like the white papers and the inclusion policies, which to some degree, one could argue and say that they indirectly promote access or even inclusion. So we believe that because of such reasons, it's important to consider access, and then most importantly, as I've been saying, digital accessibility, the operation, how nice it will be if your materials, even your platforms, sort of enables anyone to be access the material and be able to use them, because to me, it's not just about accessibility, but it's also about usability. Now, I am going to give over to my colleague, Ike, who's going to give you a breakdown on some of the platforms, and you'll be able to see me in one of the videos I've recorded myself, navigating the platform, even some of the documents with the screen reader. So without any waste of time, Ike, over to you.
Thank you, Benedict. Colleagues, Benedict tried to lay the groundwork as to the reason why accessibility of teaching and learning materials is important. And as you saw from the slide, he spoke about in terms of legislation, he talked about that. He talked about the slide showed that not only legislation, but more and more the visibility of course sites is actually also linked to how accessible they are. So, for instance, if you want a student to be able to actually find your course, maybe prospective students want to apply to come and do your course, you actually get higher search engine rankings, with your course. And in the while also, you also, if your courses are not, online courses are not accessible, you lose out on 1.3 billion people with disabilities. That's 16% of the world population that you're missing out on, who you can target and reach, and thereby actually fit into that UCT Vision 2030 goal of diversity. So what we did was that when considering digital and online accessibility of teaching and learning materials, we looked at the web aspect and also the tools which you use. We just picked out the essential ones, which we think will get you thinking around how to actually go around this accessibility, because there's a whole plethora of things to consider. So we usually look at doing these things in phases. You can't do everything at once, doing it in phases. And that's why working with Benedict and the team is for us to look at a phase kind of approach in looking at these teaching and learning materials. So the first web-based, element, which you come across a lot, on Vula, on Amathuba, and even in the tools, is headings. Now, headings make the layout and sense of your content logical. It keeps it logical. And it's not only just for people with disabilities, but also for people with non-disability. I mean, it helps lay out your information, your content in a logical way so that people can follow through. And the same way we cited users use headings to be able to make sense of your course page is the same way persons with disabilities are able to use it. And for them, it's actually more critical because if you find someone who is blind, who is using a screen reader, they need to be able to get a mental image of how the flow of your course page, proceeds. So using the right heading levels now makes it very crucial. So what we find is that sometimes when people are using headings, they sometimes people will just, I used to do it. Someone will put a heading, make it bold, increase the font size. Now that is problematic because when the screen reader goes in to read that heading, it won't read it as a heading, it just reads it as a text. And it will leave the blind user wondering what is the order and logic, of this page. So in order to make your headings accessible in your course page, it's recommended that you start from your level heading 1, the heading 1 level, and then from there you proceed further. So use your H1 heading, and then after that you use your H2, and then you continue to see if you need your H3 or your H4. In the picture by the right is an example of that. At the top right, if you're on Amathuba, at the top section, under the paragraph is where you choose your heading levels. So it's important then to use the editor's tools that is provided by Amathuba. So don't use bold or increasing the font size, but actually use the heading level tools that are provided by Amathuba. So you can see from the picture there, you have your H1 level, my favorite, and after that you go to your H2, quick and easy. Then you now go to H3, heading level, spaghetti, hamburgers, tacos, and then H4. And then if you now want to go to so you use your heading level 1, and then section H2 now take your sections, and then further down, you now go further down. If you now want to go back to the sectional heading, you go back to heading 2, then you go to heading 3. So Helen says, can you all see the presentation?
I can, Ike.
Yes.
Oh, Philip, can you just see why? Because a colleague just says she's not seeing the presentation.
Why don't somebody put a link to a link also that she could follow along otherwise?
Yes, Philip, can you take because the presentation is online, can you just copy the link and then put it in the chat so that she can follow through? So while Philip is doing that, so is to use the appropriate heading levels, but most importantly is to use the software's editor's heading level. So don't do it manually, but use the tools to be able to create your headings. With that, when the assistive technology screen reader gets there, it's able to read the heading level. And also, people with visual impairment also can search your course page using those heading levels. So you can then say that when you don't use the editor's tools to create your heading levels, then the assistive technology is not able to pick up on that. So, but when you use that, then users who use screen reader, they're able to call up all the headings on your page. When they call that up, and then the assistive technology moves from each heading level for them to be able to identify which particular heading topic that they want to go to, and then they navigate to that directly. Because, as you know, we as sighted users, when we go onto your course page, we can just scroll down to a heading level which we require. So, but for people with visual impairment, if the heading level has not been, the tool for Amathuba has not been used to indicate the heading level, they won't be able to call all the list of headings and to be able to navigate directly to the heading which they want. They will have to now go through the whole document to be able to find the heading level which they want to go to. So it makes it just very important to use the tools on Amathuba when creating heading levels. Same thing goes for lists. When you have your ordered lists, 1, 2, 3, use the tools on Amathuba. So, how you do it is just using those heading level tools, and then you're able to actually get it right. I see a hand up. I can't see who it is. Let me see.
Hi there. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. sometimes I prefer using the HTML editor instead of the what you see is what you get on the screen, simply because things happen that are unexpected often, especially when you're copying and pasting. You don't know whether the copying and pasting is the source formatting or the origin. You know what I mean? So I like using and superficially, when we look at this, we can't see whether something is heading 1 or heading 2. Usually, if it's bolded or heading 1, you can't tell. So just can you show also if it's if using the HTML editor, I think it is also indicated that way how it's done.
Yeah. So that's a very good question. What I would say to that is that it will depend on the platform. You see, like Amathuba has been built with accessibility in mind. So those editorial tools which you have on Amathuba have been made in such a way that when you use the heading levels from the tools, it's actually going to be accessible. So it depends. So the HTML editor that you're using depends if the platform of it is actually accessible. Doesn't be built on accessibility. Then if that is the case, then yes. But I always suggest use the whatever learning management system you're using or software you're using, use the editors, the editing tools which it provides to be able to create your heading levels. And then you can then just if you have people with visual impairment in the class, they can then tell you if the heading levels are actually applied. Because what they will do is that they will in their assistive technology, they will call up the list of headings. And then if the headings are not there, that means that tool that you're actually using, the platform has not yet implemented accessible heading applications. I hope that helps. I don't know if my colleagues want to come in to add any other thing.
I have just put a comment in the chat because I think underlying all the what you see is what you get. Heading styles actually have a source code in HTML, so I don't think that's a problem at all.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Cheryl. All right, so Philip, you can move to the next page, the next slide. So the next tool, the next feature which we want to talk about, next feature on web accessibility, making your content accessible, is the use of links. So links are very important to be able to link, take students from one course information to another, link them to extra resources and the rest of it. But links can become a challenge for people with visual impairment, but also for sighted users. So in making your links accessible, screen readers are able to also scan your course page for links that are available. Now, if the link is not descriptive, it's not descriptive enough, that presents challenges for people who use screen readers. So what do we mean by descriptive links? That means your link must be able to be contextually relevant. So that means it must be it must speak the destination which the link is taking the student to. So that means in the how do you do that is that, for example, you creating a descriptive link means, avoid using the URL, as the destination for the link, but rather you put the name of the destination where the link is taking the user to, and then you make that name a link. So it becomes descriptive. Because what happens is that when a screen reader goes to the link, it will read, in the example I gave there, to read https://amathuba.uct.ac.za/dl2. So you can see how that does not necessarily give the user a good context or give them an information about the destination where the link is taking them to. Well, if you say Amathuba course page, then when the student hears that from the screen reader, they know, okay, this link takes me to Amathuba course page. And when the assistive technology actually gets to that link, it actually reads first link Amathuba course page. Okay, and then avoid using phrases like I see a lot of course sites and websites are improving in this, because I see, well, for me as a sighted user, I don't notice a lot of click here, more, click for details. Those don't give the destination or the context of the link. So for example, if you want to give a link and you say to access all course materials, click here. So it's not very descriptive for the students with visual impairment. Rather, if you say to access all course materials, visit Amathuba course page. So the user now knows, okay, this link is actually taking me to Amathuba course page. It's different from when you now say click here. And it's also valuable for sighted users. I mean, I get more information when I see Amathuba course page, it's a link, as opposed to click here. Okay, so making your links descriptive is actually putting the appropriate label, that points to the destination, what the link is actually about, and then making that text, that label, a link. And then your link is actually then accessible. Okay. So that, I don't know if that's an old hand or you have a new question. Oh, okay, it's an old hand. All right. Please, if you just have questions, please just pop in your question, and I'll be happy to answer it. So, Philip, you can go to the next page, to the next slide. So, the next slide is where Benedict will now demonstrate using the screen reader on accessible links. Okay, Philip, you can go ahead.
So now, because of the nature of my work, some of my colleagues, they try to send me the links via email. Others, they can send them via the chat. So in this document, because I sometimes get confused or get lost with so many links here and there to search for them. So what I have done, I've created a Word document with all the links that everybody's sending me. So what I am going to do is to navigate how these sort of links have been sent to me and how JAWS is reading them. So we're going to go on top of the page. So this one is a link to the course that I just shared earlier on. But as you can hear, here is more HTTP. So now here you can hear the difference. Here is more a link to the documents, but I'm just going to navigate to a link where whoever sent me the link to this was so clever in giving me a clear description of the link. This one, Introduction to Public Health. You can hear there's no HTTP, it just says clear link, Introduction to Public Health. But what is also fascinating is that I can already hear the link introduction. This sort of a very weird sort of sound instead of HTTP. Even the one below, a link to research methodology. So this one are very descriptive, very clear. I don't have to struggle to listen, unlike the previous one where there's some. Yes, you can hear that there's so many HTTPs and resources and slash. So when JAWS is reading all of this, it might be very much confusing for one with a screen reader. Unlike if it's just a clear direct link like the one that I just showed you earlier on. You can see even how when I open the links menu to search for the correct link, with this one, the two, introduction, public health and research, the link is quite clear. Unlike the previous, exactly how you see it, there's so many HTTP and Amathuba and this and this. So it's always advisable then to follow the same format as my colleague who did a link to the introduction to public health, because in a direct link, there is no HTTP or there's no click here. So yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Philip, you can go to the next slide. So in there, you just got a little bit of demonstration on what you might not have picked up all what Jaws was saying, because different users set it to different speed, but at least you got a little bit of the context of when the URL is used as opposed to when a descriptive link is used. Okay, so the next item to watch out for when you're designing your course website is the use of colors. Colors definitely impacts on the readability of a course for everyone, but except for people using screen readers, because they can't see the colors that you use on your web page. So therefore, contrasting colors help to perceive information better for people who have low vision, okay, and also people who are, who have difficulty differentiating colors, who are colorblind, for instance, okay. So when color is used to convey information, then it becomes very critical in the contrast, that is contrast of colors that is used between the text and the background. It becomes very important for people to be able to perceive the information that you give. So a recommendation is not to use color as the only means which you use to convey information. If you use color to convey information, also either have text or some other form to also convey that information, so that people who use screen readers can be able to understand the information. So if there's a picture that I put out there from Colorado State University, where they try to differentiate to show high contrast colors and low contrast colors. So the first column, you can see it's very high contrast, where you have a black text over white background. And at the bottom, you have white text over black background. So the contrast is high. So this will be very much accessible for people with low vision. When the next column, you can see the gray, you have a gray background with text that is also darker gray. That is even more difficult. And you can see from this that this is not only only good for people with low vision, but even me, us as a sighted user, this is difficult for me to read. At the bottom one, you have a darker, I think that's gray, darker gray with darker gray background with lighter gray text. It makes it more difficult for me to be able to actually read the content there. So even if you use in the third column, you have a sharp, blue text over white background, which is also high contrast. And the bottom, you have blue text on a black background. That's high contrast. But on the last column, you can see where there's reddish text with a kind of a green background. The contrast is not very high. So it just, these things might seem minor, but when your course site has a lot of pages that students have to go through, it becomes very tasking for a student with low vision. And what does that mean? It means it adds extra time for them to be able to go through your content. But when you consider high contrast with your course page, it makes it easier for them to be able to go through it. And how can you do that? Is of course checking the contrast, but there's also accessibility tools which one can use to check your contrast. But if you just maintain things like black text over white background, that should be enough. And also when if you're creating like a PowerPoint, these days, Microsoft PowerPoint, the themes which they provide are actually accessible. They actually provide, like this theme which we're actually using here, actually has good contrast. It has a brownish, sorry if I'm not getting the colors very accurately, but brownish background and white text. So the contrast is high. So you can also explore using these tools to be able to check contrast, if your contrast is enough, if you're struggling with that, and then they'll be able to give you information. What we're going to be doing is that we're going to, as we roll out video training tutorials, we're also going to start trying to work with these tools to do video tutorials on how to use them to check contrast. Thank you. Philip, you can go to the next slide. So the next slide talks about tables. So if you're using tables in your course design, it's very important to be aware of certain things. So definitely tables, contain your rows and your columns that give meaning to the data in your tables, table grid. Okay. Sighted users, we can quickly look at the table. We can tell what the column, is talking about and what the rows are about. Okay. So those rows and columns help make association with visual association with what the data is actually saying. But people who rely on screen reader they walk through your table cell by cell. So they are not able to see the big picture, about, what the table contains. So because of that, it becomes challenging when they are not able to tell the column headers and the row headers. So because of that, making your table accessible becomes very, very important. So that when they get to the table, it tells them how many columns are there, how many rows are there. They get a mental image of what the table is about, and then they're able to make sense of your table when they now navigate each cell because they can't see it. Okay, so how do you make your tables, accessible? Is by making sure that the header, you apply the header row to your table. And how do you do that? So if you're like on a Microsoft Word document, how do you do that? If you create a table, you will go to the first cell of the table, put your cursor there, and then you now go to table design, which is the picture I'm trying to show by the bottom right-hand corner. Table design. When you click on table design, you will see an icon that says header row. You now click on that header row, and then your table now has the appropriate header title, so that the user who uses the screen reader is able to actually get a sense of the table. Then once you're done with that, to make sure that the table is accessible, you can use your tabbed keys. So you place your cursor on the first row, and then you tab from left to right, because that is how the screen reader is going to read the table. So just make sure as you're tabbing that is the right order that if your tabs follow the order you intend for the user to read the table, then the screen reader will be able to actually follow the table also. And last thing I want to say about tables is that avoid as much as possible using merged cells. Merged cells throw out the order of your table for a screen reader, because the user will now try to start to wonder, okay, in what column is this data that I'm in this merged cell, in, and it throws out the order and the layout of the table. So as much as possible, avoid using merged cells when you create a table. Okay, thank you. You can go to the next slide. Okay, in here, I think Benedict is now going to demonstrate using a table with a screen reader. Okay, you can go ahead, Philip.
The last document on the tables, which I would like to demonstrate, is our HR document, which has a bit of some merge cells. It is compatible, as you can hear, just saying. Again, some of can you those HTTPs? I'm just going to skip all of that. As you can hear, so when just say blank, it means there's nothing on this table, but I'm certain that there are some writings.
non-uniform table, new cell, out of table 3, non-uniform table, new cell 1, review performance in the last performance cycle, 1 of 6, out of table, table 2, non-uniform table, new cell, out of table, table 2, non-uniform table, new cell, out of table, table 3, non-uniform table, new cell 1, review performance in the last staff members and bullet position perform bullet dysfunction, out of table, table 4, non-uniform table, new cell, page 2, page rate performance rated for the last performance cycle, 2 of 6.
I hope you all can see what is happening when I try to navigate through this table. Even with, I'm not even sure. I can hear what I am, but it's not quite clear to me.
Line manager selected. Last cell in table, warning, pressing tab to add an extra row. Line manager, out of table for the development type,
Yep. So this is one of those inaccessible merging tables that if not designed with disability in mind, it will create lots of barriers for those with screen readers like myself and with other disabilities. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's the video, Benedict. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I see there's a comment in the chat. Let me see. Okay. Okay, Michelle has to read. Okay, thanks. Okay, so the next element is navigation. So being able to navigate your course website. So the users with motor difficulties, so not being able to use their hands to use a mouse, usually will find it difficult if you have a web page or a course page that cannot be navigated with the keyboard only. Okay, so if, as you know, when you structure your course page, you structure it in a logical way. But the thing is, sometimes some things that needed to be accomplished on your course page will require the use of a mouse. Now, because not everybody can use a mouse, it becomes very important to check if your course page can be navigated with the keyboard only. Okay, so that is very important because if users are not able to use keyboard only to navigate your page, then you are automatically excluding those users, or they will have to have a third party help them to be able to do the activities on your course page. And as much as possible, people with disabilities want to be independent, like you and I, you know, who is able to go through a course page without much needed support. So what we recommend is that to make your course page accessible in terms of navigation for users who use only keyboard, when you finish testing your course page, navigate through all the elements on your course page. So if there's a button where they need to click to submit a page, if there's a link where they need to go to access other materials, if there's a form where they need to type in information information for your course page, use your keyboard only to essentially use the tab and navigational keys, the up and right, up, down, sideways button. Use those to navigate your course page, and then make sure that everything which a sighted user needs to accomplish on your course page, that a person using a screen reader who uses the keyboard is able to also accomplish the same thing. So there's a button to submit something, navigate with it through your keyboard, and make sure that with the keyboard only, a person can submit the content. If there's a place where you have links, make sure that using the keyboard, you can get to the link, you hit enter, it opens the link. So once you can use the keyboard to navigate all that, then you can be rest assured that in terms of navigation, using the screen reader for people who are visually impaired, that is accessible to them. Okay. Okay, thank you. You can go to the next page. So in here, Benedict will demonstrate using Amathuba, a screen reader with Amathuba. Go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Benedict. So what I'm going to demonstrate today is how I navigate the course site, which is Amathuba, our LMS, as you call it in, with the screen reader. I am on my home page. So already logged in. So because I have two accounts, my student account as well as my staff account, ideally I would choose the staff, but then for the purpose of this activity, I'm going to choose my student account as the course that I'm going to navigate. I've registered to it as a student. There you go. So what I've heard so far is that I'm on the home page, and I'm quickly going to check if this is an HTML page.
There are 6 regions. There are 21 headings. 4 at level 1, 3 at level 2, 14 at level 3. There are 24. There are 2 grades. There are 12 smart advanced highlights on this page. https://amathuba.net. Escape.
So what you have heard is I use just shortcut keys to now to identify the nature of the page and the links as well as the headings. So to check if the headings are accessible, I'm going to use the shortcut keys to navigate to the links. There are 51 links. So the one that I'm looking for, let's go for week 1 of the course. Yeah, let's rather take week 0. So then I'm going to enter. Correct. Because I've been here before, so when Joss can alert me that I've been here before. So there's a link that's saying visit, introduce yourself. So as you heard that, so I've been here before. That's what Joss is alerting me. So I'm going to check if there's any link that I might have missed or. The course outline I did. So in as one could say, I've checked all the options on week 0.
Okay, thank you. So as you can see, Jabu has gone, it did just a little bit demonstration on navigating Amathuba and being able to call up links. And if you notice, we weren't able to see what was any movement on the screen. He was getting mostly audio feedback to be able to navigate the screen and know what to do. So sometimes you won't get a visual response, but auditory response. Okay, then the next element is videos. So videos, of course, we use a lot for teaching and learning. So in order to make it accessible, first of all, is to check that the video does not have autoplay, because once you have autoplay, the user has not even got an opportunity to get a sense of what the video is about. So it's usually best to not have the video on autoplay, and then also to make sure that the video controls. So where you have your fast forward, play, pause, and the rest of it the user is able to access it using the keyboard. So that means if you're using like YouTube is usually mostly accessible. But if you're having other video tools which you're using on your course site, it's good to also navigate that video tool using the keyboard to make sure that those controls can be used. But most importantly is that videos should have captions. Captions help students with hearing impairments to be able to understand what is happening in the video. So to have captions, subtitles, and transcripts. And captions and transcripts are not only just for students with hearing impairment. They also help your students who are living in areas with limited internet. They're able to download the transcript and they're able to read through and get a sense of what happened in the video. During COVID, we found out that it was very difficult for students to be able to learn in certain environments. When there's noisy environment, captions also help. So how to make it accessible is to actually make sure that when you use the keyboard, you can turn on the captions on and off, and also that your captions, that the video actually has captions, and you can navigate, stop, play, and rewind the video using just the keyboard. Thank you. Next slide. So we're running out of time. So those are your, when you're creating your course site. Now we're talking about the tools which we use for creating course content. And we use a lot of PDFs, at the university. So making your PDF accessible is actually, normally you will create your document on a Microsoft Word document, right? And once you do that, a Microsoft Word document actually has what you call an accessibility checker. I should have put a picture there, but accessibility checker on Microsoft Word document, normally you go to the menu item where you have review. Once you click on the review menu item, there is an accessibility checker as a menu item. And once you click on it, it's actually able to tell you the accessibility issues that you have. It will show you the errors, and then it will show you steps on how to fix those errors. So for instance, if you have a picture on your Microsoft Word document, it will tell you how to fix it. Now, what happens is that when you now export that Microsoft Word document to PDF, normally the accessibility features carries through. Okay, but you can test your PDF for accessibility by turning on the read aloud. So if you turn on the read aloud for your PDF, if it's able to read all the contents on your PDF, and especially when it gets to an image, it reads, because images need what you call alternative text. If it's able to read that, then you know that your PDF is accessible. But lastly, you can also, sometimes PDFs are scanned. Now you can actually extract the text from that PDF by using what you call an OCR, an optical character recognition software that is able to help you extract the text, and then that text you can now put it on a Word document. Okay, thank you. You can move to the next slide. Then lastly, PowerPoint. Second to last is PowerPoint. We use, what I'm using now today is a PowerPoint. What we're using today is a PowerPoint, and we use it a lot for teaching and learning. And there are a few things which you can do to make it more accessible, especially to students with visual impairment. So first of all, just as in Amathuba, whatever style you are applying on a PowerPoint, use the built-in tools that comes with PowerPoint, because Microsoft has linked those tools to best accessibility practices. So if you're using the templates or layouts that come with PowerPoint, that should normally be accessible. But also, when you finish developing your PowerPoint, or when you're developing your PowerPoint, use the outline view, because the outline view will indicate if every element that you have or text that you have on the PowerPoint should appear on the outline view. Whatever you have on your PowerPoint slide that does not appear on the outline view, that means the screen reader will not be able to pick that up. So when you finish developing your PowerPoint, it's good to pull up the outline view, and then with keyboard, start going through each of the text or headings on the outline view, and to make sure that your keyboard gets to all of them, because that is how the screen reader is going to actually go through your PowerPoint. So check it in outline view. And of course, use alternative text for images. Then that will be accessible for people with visual impairment. And don't save your web page as don't save your PowerPoint as a web page, because once you save that, the HTML elements that it creates actually does not carry over the accessibility features, and some of them might be disrupted. Okay. So how do you make it accessible? Like I said, is when you create your PowerPoint, go to the accessibility checker on the PowerPoint by clicking on review, accessibility checker, and it will show you the errors, and then to show you how to fix those errors. Okay, next slide, please. Then last is the Word document, which we use a lot. So similar to PowerPoint, use the editorial tools that you have that Word document comes with. We talked about headings, so use the heading tools on the editor to create your headings. If you're using bullet list, use the bullet list tools, numbered list, the unnumbered list, use all those. But avoid using floating text boxes because the screen reader is not able to pick that up, okay? And then alternative text also for images. So similar to PowerPoint, how do you test if your Word document is accessible? Use the accessibility checker on Word, and then to be able to highlight the errors and how to fix it. Okay, next slide. So we then thought about, we just developed this action plan, initial action plan. If you now want to think about, okay, what do I actually need to do to be able to start thinking around accessibility of my course website, okay? So the first thing is, how will I start? How will you start, okay? One of the best things to do is to start looking out for these sorts of training workshops from SILT on making your course teaching and learning materials accessible. Because Benedict and I and Philip will be working from time to time. We'll also start to create training videos, short bite-sized training videos on different aspects of accessibility that you can, play and then be able to actually get a sense of what you need to do. We will also be providing, accessibility guides. So what we presented today are very limited sections of accessibility. There's a whole comprehensive accessibility guide which Benedict has been developing. We're going to provide that on SILT website so that you can go through it also to be able to know what to do for different learning materials and also different aspects of your course website. Then, who can support you? Of course, is to call on our UCT SILT, and they will be able to advise better on what to do in terms of support in making your course site accessible. You could, your department can think of, maybe we may not know, there might be other sections of your department that also can support you in making your course website accessible. Then, when should you start thinking about accessibility? It's always usually better when you are actually designing your course webpage. At the planning stage, that's the best part, because then you avoid retrofitting. So that means you finish developing the course site, and then you're not thinking about accessibility. So think about it when you're planning your course, and then you should be able to avoid, going back, and then which will cost you more time, resources in order to be able to make your course accessible. And then when should you plan on doing it? Of course, so you should start looking at this for your courses that are going to start next year. So start looking at how can you make your courses accessible for next year. Then finally, it's just now a discussion to say, Philip, you can move to the next slide. Discussion to say, what do you see can be the likely challenges for you in making your course website accessible, or challenges in using those tools, these few tools which we've presented today? So it's now open for any discussion. Anything you want to bring in making your course website accessible, what do you think will be maybe the potential challenges? Because we will take that and we'll factor that into mitigating factors in next training workshop. And we're hoping this has been a little bit helpful for you in thinking around accessibility. Yes, Mr. Parker, please go ahead.
Hi. I think I had a slightly different idea of what was about accessibility. My thoughts were actually on students who use a mobile device, say a cell phone, instead of using a computer. And obviously, a mobile will format the page differently and that sort of thing. So I thought it was designed for a smaller device in some sense. Is there any thought going into that sort of accessibility issue for, even able-bodied students who are trying to access it that way?
Thank you for that question. Now that is very important, because in today's teaching and learning, a lot of students are actually accessing course materials and even maybe actually carrying out some course tasks on mobile device. So that's very true. And the same thing we are talking about here, we're actually thinking around it. We're also going to dive into how to make course materials accessible on a mobile device. Because on a mobile device also, even for sighted users, is, like you said, how to be able to carry out functions you carry on a computer. Of course, there's a limitation about the screen, but even students and staff members who have a disability, they also use screen readers on a mobile device. So it's also very important to check how course sites are adapted to that kind of screen. So this will be something that will be upcoming. I can't say exactly when, but it will be upcoming because that is also an area we also have thought about in looking at how can students be able to navigate course sites on a mobile device, but especially those that use, because if you're using Apple device, you're using a voiceover. Using voiceover to be able to do that, and if you're using Android, you're also using voiceover to be able to navigate mobile device. So please watch out for that. When that becomes available, you'll be able to get a notification from CELT. Any other person thinks of challenges? Do you think it will be difficult for you to be able to consider accessibility? We only have 1 minute left. So any last comments?
Okay, I was just going to ask Benny.
Please.
If you're giving a link to, say, a WooClap poll in the chat during your online session, how readable is that? Does a screen reader help?
It does, but especially with Teams, the interaction with links on Teams is slightly challenging. So what I normally do is copy the link, paste it on a Word document again so that I could be able to interact with the link.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, but that's a bit of extra work for you.
It is an extra work. Yeah.
Thanks, Benny.
Thanks. And Ike, I think because of time, we need to wrap up.
Yeah.
So let me take this opportunity to thank you, Dr. Nwans. I don't know, why didn't you remind me, Ike, that you're now Dr. Nwans, but thank you so much for doing this task with me. Colleagues, the work doesn't end here. As Ike said, there will be more of these webinars around accessible materials and accessible platform, and hopefully we might also shift towards pedagogy, because for us, we really want to promote this inclusivity. Thank you so much, Philip, for always being my handman and right man to help and to work with in this accessibility work. Highly appreciate your presence. And once again, thank you everyone for being with us today. And thank you, Ike, again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Look forward to having you in our next workshop.
Cheers, everyone.